Oh, hi there. So, today I wanted to talk a bit about something that always comes up when you hear autism and people having difficulty interacting socially, which is lack of eye contact. And that is so misunderstood. Uh, you always hear, people with autism have trouble making eye contact, and that is true. Uh, but it's just ridiculous how it's often, even taught to autistic people. Oh, to blend in and be and seem more attentive by just looking at the other person more, and often that backfires so much. And I see that ironically even with uh, people uh, on autism YouTube channels, that they just stare, in my opinion, at the camera way too much. They've trained themselves when talking to really hone in and look and look and look and never look away. And to me, that's one of those potential telltale signs of autism, actually, because neurotypical people don't do that. They look away. It's like they're always, they the next idea that they want to talk about, they almost get out of the air. They look away a bit, and more natural, and their head moves, and their body language is very relaxed. So one of the signs that is even backfiring big time, because it looks aggressive. You look like a tiger ready to pounce if your body language is very stiff, and if you add to that you talk and you don't look away, or you look at the other person way too much and you stare at them and you never look away while you talk, that is absolutely terrible. And that still gets taught, and I think it has its origin in that, parents desperately wanting to get the attention of their autistic child to make them clean up the room or eat or do something. So they always say, look at me when I'm talking to you, look at me. And what they want is attention. But it is very, very difficult for people on the spectrum to look at people's faces, uh, um, because it's difficult for everybody when they do heavily brain heavy brain work. And you can do that with a neurotypical person too. If you're neurotypical and watching this, think about if you were forced to look somebody in the eye while you're doing a complex math problem, or while you are trying to remember, complex details. I think there's something where, you know, Homo sapiens is a very, very social species. We kicked out the Neanderthals because, we are so attuned to each other. And I think whenever we look at a human face, it floods the brain with information. The brain gets really, really focused. And neurotypical people have that. Autistic people have that, but autistic people have to do so much brain work to for all the other things too, for to mask, and they do that not even knowing they're doing it. But if an autistic person talks, uh, just just by them trying to get a thought across, they have to do so much brain work that this added huge stimulus of looking somebody in the eye or having that face there is almost, impossible. So and I always find it helpful to think of a way more autistic person. And if you've watched videos of very autistic children, they look everywhere but their parents. So you can imagine, telling that, maybe as an parent, you want to tell the child, please just, pay attention to me, just look at me, I want to feel like you're seeing me, like you're listening to me. And if that maybe non-verbal autistic child could talk, I imagine they might say, I am listening to you, I am paying attention to you. It's just so much stimulus even just to listen to your voice and to be there in that space and in it and do a minimum of interaction that I can't do on top of that, the looking at the other person, looking at the parent. So at least that's how I imagine it is, because to a very, very, very slight degree, much more slight degree is it with me, where if I'm thinking hard, if I'm thinking how do I get this thought across, and I have to constantly put myself in the shoes of a neurotypical person or an autistic person watching this, then it's just my habit that I look away, I look on the floor, and of course that is terrible. I mean, in a professional setting, the important thing is to frequently look at the other person. You don't have to always look at the other person. You just have to look at them enough to show that you pay attention. And that can be just while you're talking, and then you think of the next thought and you look away, and then you can talk some more. And if you watch some YouTubers, so it's perfect for that, because a lot of social YouTubers are very, very adept at speaking, and you see they always look away. They might even look away for seconds at a time, but then they always look back at the camera because they do know it's important to focus on that other person, even if it's in that case just a camera. So after a lot of thinking about this whole, why is it so difficult for me to look at somebody's face? It's that huge amount of information that then drowns out a lot of other thought processes that I need to keep going on. I think that really trumps a lot of other aspects, because for a while I thought, okay, maybe it's a bit like stimming. Autistic people very often, they want to keep moving, to keep the thoughts moving, and I do that with my hands probably here a lot, but I felt like it's uncomfortable to tell your eyes to stand still. They, at the very least, they want to flit around the face, maybe flit around the room, or maybe rest somewhere else, or move around. So I thought maybe that had something to do with it, and maybe it does, but not as much as the mere fact that looking at the person floods the brain, takes up a lot of mental capacity. And I compared it a little bit with my cat, because I can look at her, no problem. I can look at her face, her eyes, even talk with her, have conversations back and forth, meow back and forth, and it's not a problem then for my eyes to be still or to pay attention. It's just because looking at a cat, that's not that mental effort of reading a human face. And certainly, maybe a little bit what plays into it too is, and I mention that frequently, is that if you have autism, every human interaction, social interaction you have is kind of burned maybe just a bit from all that stuff from early childhood to now. A lot of failed talks, a lot of failed interactions, a lot of rejection, a lot of people not liking you, a lot of people staring at you maybe because they think you're weird, so you hate looking at people a little bit too, because if they look at you back, you start wondering, am I acting weird? Is something wrong? Am I not fitting in? So it can actually be uncomfortable to have that moment that a lot of is actually really nice. When you look at somebody, they look back, you really pay attention to each other. But again, normal neurotypical people don't really stare ever for a prolonged period of time. And this used to be a dating channel a long time ago. I mean, that's one of the creepiest things a guy can do, is to stare too much without blinking at a woman he's interested in. And that too much can just be 5 or 6 seconds without blinking, and with a stiff body language if the woman doesn't know him. And that can only feel like, oh, this man is aggressive, just gotta stay away from him. So it's really interesting how too much eye contact is like, is something you got to be very, very wary about as a person with autism. And another point that maybe plays a little bit into it is that faces are just maybe not that meaningful to me. I mean, they are meaningful, but maybe not to the degree that they are for a neurotypical person. So I definitely have that face blindness that a lot of people report that are on the spectrum, where just faces are not as memorable. I think it's because we don't take in, even with all the mental work we do, looking at somebody, trying to keep the conversation going, we don't take enough in of that face. So that really hurt me in a job where I was a consultant. I was meeting a ton of people and was trying to remember their names, because I really go maybe by some facial features. With men, very often it's facial hair. If that man shaves off his beard or trims his beard, forget about it. That actually happened to me one time, where I was like meeting a new team, had traveled into a city, and there was a dinner, and there were like 8 people at the table, and in the next day I was meeting maybe a whole team of 20 in the office, and I introduced myself to one of the guys, as if I was meeting him for the first time, and he had actually been at the dinner previously, but he had like cleaned up, like both his clothes and his facial hair were markedly different the next morning. So and I noticed that when I watch shows too, like I've been watching on Prime Video that what's it called, The Peripheral, and there are like several women in their 30s with dark hair, and it's hard to keep track of the plot, especially that jumps back and forth in time with these women, when to me I really have to look at details of their hair, to tell them apart, and movies and TV shows can be very confusing to me. So that certainly also maybe plays into it, that you don't look at the face as much if it's just not as interesting to you. And even the men that I dated, the face becomes familiar and something that I love after weeks, maybe months. It's I don't know. I know it's for a lot of neurotypical people. It's like this falling in love at first glance. Just because you love the face so much, that seems a little bit difficult to grasp for me. But that's another interesting aspect of the whole thing. If you're not getting as much out of it to look at somebody, maybe you don't even remember to do it. And maybe, I don't know, if you're autistic, do you hang a lot of pictures of people on your wall? I don't. I never really saw the point. And I'm older, like in the 90s, like every other parent would like hang up family pictures from Olin Mills, or the kids' school pictures, or there were like graduation pictures. And to me, it's like meaningless. First of all, the person or that face on the picture is not even, to me, it's like it's nothing in common when you meet the person. It's like night and day. A picture of a face is like meaningless, and nor does it invoke even that great of a rush of good emotions. But then again, I'm sadly, the autism has like led to, and I don't talk about it much, but that part of my life. Do I have a lot of people in my life that I love and love me? No, not really. So maybe that plays into it, that if you have a lot of people, if you have a very supportive family that you treasure, then you maybe treasure those faces on the wall. But that's been another kind of thing where it's always puzzled me a little bit, that people love looking at faces so much that there are some faces that they put on the wall, so they constantly look at them. And even while watching TV, there are faces on the wall. It's like, dang, that's like even uncomfortable, because you feel like somebody's staring at you all the time. And if you're a neurotypical person wanting, or in a relationship with a person with autism, or you even you're thinking about it, maybe think about what you have on the wall, because distracting things, and faces are immensely distracting. If it's done to an excess, can actually be something that makes a person on the spectrum uncomfortable. But okay, so I've gotten way in the weeds again. So basically, I did a lot of thinking about why it's difficult to look look people in the eye, look at their faces. I think it is because of that that rush of information that comes into the brain. And autistic people have that just like neurotypical people. We get the same rush of where the brain really wants to focus and read everything on the face. We have more problems doing that and actually getting the information out of it, but the physical neurological response is still there, and that makes it very hard to carry on the conversation, think about the next thought. And going back to my example at the very beginning, it's difficult for neurotypical people to give them something where they have to think very hard, and they will not be able to look you in the eye or look at the face while doing it, or they'll find it very, very just as uncomfortable as we find just carrying on small talk while looking a person in the eye, because for an autistic person even small talk can be very difficult and a challenge. So it doesn't mean you don't like it, just that it's a challenge, takes a lot more thinking than for the average person cruising along. Oh, wait a second. So I already wrapped up the video recording and started taking the camera down and everything, and I thought of one important thing, which is and this used to be a dating channel, so a very important thing when you interact with the other gender, especially if you're a man, maybe a man on the spectrum interacting with a woman, and if you're in a relationship, I wanted to emphasize it is so important to look at the other person, because to a woman, even an autistic woman, it means the man finds us attractive, the man wants to have that emotional, intimate connection with us. And if a man always looks away or looks away while talking, even being on the spectrum, even not really being super comfortable with people looking at you, if you're in a relationship, that can be really corrosive. And I've had that with my autistic boyfriends, where if your boyfriend doesn't look at you much, you start wondering, does he even find me attractive? And the nicest compliment you can give somebody if you're having dinner with them, if you're already in a relationship, is to really try to make more eye contact, not staring, and try to keep your body language loose and everything, but if you're just looking away all the time, it's not good. And the part that often, and I said that can be difficult also about looking a person in the face, is that we are very insecure as people on the spectrum. But if you're really, really trusting somebody, if you're in a relationship with them, if you start being really, really comfortable with them, and that's, to me, is one of the most wonderful thing about dating. If you find a partner, is that then this person wants the best for you, and that person appreciates you, and the person spends lots of hours with you. So that gives you then the confidence where you can actually talk with them, and they talk with you, and talking is not as much mental effort because you know each other so well, and you that person likes you, so you're not as insecure about, oh, what will they think about my next sentence or whatever. And so that is where eye contact comes in. Lots of eye contact for a person with autism, and I just think that's very important to mention. And when we get more into the intimate details, especially in bed, and I just had, let's say, one or two men in my life who just, even in bed, just didn't want to look at me. And there's nothing as devastating as, in the long term, when you get physically intimate with somebody, and their favorite position and everything they do seem kind of geared around that they don't have to look at you. And maybe that's, that doesn't mean, maybe can't fault them, because to a man, very often being intimate with a woman, that's a lot of effort, a lot of mental effort too. And again, if they're on the spectrum, maybe they just want to just focus on that. And a lot of men are like, oh, I really want to satisfy my woman, etc. And it becomes to them like a thing of great focus. where maybe they don't want to get distracted by just looking at the face. But yeah, no, absolutely doesn't matter if the man's autistic, the woman's on the spectrum, especially as a woman. I think you will always want a man who spends at least some of the time actually looking at you, and that is so important in intimate situations. Like the remedy, a big remedy for a lot of alienated couples, I think, would be to just start looking at each other again. Make a point of not just talking while looking away, not just talking while looking at the TV, but really looking at the other person at least sometimes, not all the time, but regularly show that you really enjoy looking at your partner. And yeah, so just that was a very important thing that I wanted to throw that in, and I edit that in and then just go back to and wrap up the video. Right, so yeah, I hope you got something out of it. That it's definitely human interaction and conversation. And the more I've been doing research into autism, the more that fascinates me, because autism is about social interaction, the deficit thereof, and no matter how well versed you get, there remain some problems, and the more you can think about them, maybe you find a way to solve them more. And it's certainly something that I'll talk some more. So anyway, enough rambling. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.